Hi everyone, and welcome back from spring break. We're going to kick off our lectures with exploring academic argument as advocacy. Before we begin though, you'll need the following materials for the lecture assignment. You'll need a document to write on, as well as access to your materials for projects 2 and 3. Now, you're not really going to have to do like any revision with them, but more for an opportunity to reflect and think about the directions that you want to take for project 4, which we'll start working on. The purpose and goals for today's lecture are as follows. We'll define the term advocacy. We'll understand how academic writing functions as a space for advocacy, and we'll explore the intersections of public progress and academic composition. Defining advocacy. So what do I mean when I use this term advocacy? Well, I really honestly like the definition from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and they explain it as public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. So you can sort of see how advocacy and argument go hand in hand. So advocacy is where you identify something specific and say, hey, in order to make this necessary change, this is how we're going to have to approach it, which is essentially what you're doing for your civic engagement argument. You are advocating for change. You are advocating for a certain type of policy or a certain way of thinking about something to enact change that you think is appropriate and necessary. When we think about the importance of advocacy, we can identify a number of benefits from it, and we can definitely see how it is important, not just in writing, but in public life in general, be that on the university campus or beyond. What advocacy does, it allows you to use your knowledge, talent, and skill sets to make changes you find important. So if you think about it this way, over the past couple projects, you've been gaining an in-depth knowledge and really building a solid base of information regarding a topic that you're interested in and passionate about. This is information and knowledge that perhaps not everyone knows. And so this is your opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to make good use of this and try to help out. And that sort of leads into another benefit of advocacy, and I think what makes it so important is that it allows you to use writing or communication in general to help marginalize, disenfranchise, or other groups in a given culture. So these are people or individuals who for some reason or another cannot speak for themselves or have a difficult time really saying, hey, this is what we need. And of course, there are a number of reasons for that, and that's going to change from one culture to the next. And perhaps even based off of some of the topics you all have explored, you are speaking for the voiceless. You are speaking for those who cannot make arguments for themselves, who cannot advocate for themselves. So you have the opportunity to say, hey, I know a lot about this topic. I'm a solid academic writer, and I want to help out this entity, this group, who otherwise cannot make the changes that are necessary in order for them to be successful. And so in doing that, when we think about the importance of advocacy and what it can do, I think kind of an overarching benefit is that it leads towards social progress. It allows us to say, okay, what's not working? What can we do in order to address this issue? What can we do in order to improve upon our current situation and make our culture better, more accessible, more inclusive, whatever the case may be, for all of those who reside in it? Now, when we think about academic arguments, a lot of the time we might not think of them as opportunities for advocacy, especially in public life. Oftentimes we tend to separate the work that we do at school from our lives elsewhere. So we might not see the immediate relevance, perhaps, of what we're doing in one class to how that could be helpful for your neighborhood or for a group that you are involved with or for a particular cause that you find worthy and worthy of help and improvement. But when we think about what we do with academic arguments, the purpose of them and of academic composition in general, not just for this class, but for all of the courses that you're going to take, is to deeply and thoroughly explore a specific area of interest. And again, that's what you all have been doing. You've identified a topic that you're interested in, and you have invested the past few months in really building a solid foundation of knowledge on that topic. You've explored it from a number of different perspectives. You've had the opportunity to gather scholarly information on that topic to see what the more formal research looks like. And a lot of the time we can say, hey, we can take what this research is saying, and we can make arguments to have a real impact, be it on the university campus, if that's what you're writing about, or elsewhere. Going back to our discussion on synthesis, we can also think of academic arguments as a way for extending a certain dialogue. So remember that when we synthesize the different perspectives, one thing that we took into consideration and that many of you addressed was how is one source extending off of another, and how are they furthering the discussion? Are they accounting for technologies or methods that might not have been available? Are they accounting for changes in a culture or a society that may not have been pressing at the time that that research was produced? And this is your opportunity to say, hey, this is really interesting research, but it pertains to a different geographic region. Maybe, for example, you're focusing on things that are relevant to the St. George area. And you find yourself saying, hey, this is really fascinating, but we don't live in Florida, so I'm curious how I can extend this author's argument to not apply necessarily to Florida, but to demonstrate how it might apply to St. George. So that is your opportunity to extend the dialogue, to say, hey, this is an argument someone made in a different area, and this is how we can make it apply to where we're at. And of course, this can go beyond geography. Maybe you find an argument that talks about millennials, but you say, hey, this research could also apply to Gen Z or Gen X or the baby boomers. Maybe you find yourself saying, oh, this, article was written on the Baptist denomination of Christianity. I'm curious how we can apply it to the Mormon denomination. And so what we can do with academic arguments is basically say, what body of knowledge exists on this topic now, and how can I take my own interest to extend it and to show how it's relevant in other areas, or maybe it's not, depending on the topic you're writing on and how you want to approach it. Academic arguments, though, are grounded in answering the question, so what? Why does this research matter? Who is it going to help? How can we use it to better a certain situation? So as you go throughout Project 4 especially, and as you start to develop these very detailed and well-supported arguments, you want to keep coming back to that question to say, okay, well, so what? What good comes out of this? Remember, going back to our principles of ethics that we discussed during the annotated bibliography, we've really got that principle of beneficence there to basically say we use our work. In that case, we were looking at it in terms of using and borrowing from sources, but in this case, we're looking at it in terms of our argument to say, what good can I do with this argument? Who can I help? Who can I benefit? And again, that's of course going to change from one person to the next. Even if you find that you're writing on the same topic as someone, you might identify a different public or group of individuals who you might be wanting to help out or wanting to help improve their life situation. So when we think about designing our argument through the lens of advocacy, especially academic arguments, there are a few key things that we'll want to keep in mind. And these are thoughts that you want to revisit as you continue to draft Project 4, the civic engagement argument. So you'll, of course, first want to start off with carefully examine why you're interested in the topic. So this is your opportunity to say, okay, well, why did I start writing about this in the first place? And, I've had students who have initially answered that question with, oh, there was just a lot of information on it. Well, there's a lot of information on a lot of topics. You chose that one for a specific reason. Why? Sometimes that's related to personal experience. Sometimes it's an interaction with your personal moral philosophies and your spiritual beliefs. Sometimes it's based off of the way that you were raised. And so you arrived at your topic for a very specific reason. So when you know your motivation, remember that when you did the annotated bibliography, you had to ask or address, what is the purpose? Why does this research exist? And this is your way of sort of checking that in your own work to say, okay, well, why am I writing this argument? What good is it going to do? And what do I want to get out of it? Also, as you're going through and you're working on your argument and you're developing it, you want to first clearly articulate who you want to help. So with your claim, with your thesis, which we'll explore in greater detail in the next core lecture, who benefits from it? So if you are, let's say, writing on, let's go to the example of medicinal marijuana, medicinal cannabis. Maybe you say those suffering from debilitating diseases. That's who is going to be helped by my topic. Let's say you're writing on increasing funding for humane societies. The animals are the ones who you are helping out. Let's say that you are focusing on developing charter schools. Maybe you say students are who I am helping. Then you want to consider how you want to help them. So what kind of argument can you make that will most help that group of people or individuals? How can you develop an argument to help them in their situation and to help them achieve success or equality or however it is that you're approaching your argument? And then you'll finally want to think about why helping them contributes toward the greater good. So again, even if you're writing on the same topic as someone in the class, you might have different ways of understanding what that greater good looks like and how your argument helps achieve it. So for example, if I were to say, okay, well, I think that we should, I'll make the argument that city governments should give more to local humane societies and give more monetary donations or contribute more taxes to sustaining humane societies. And let's say a couple people make that argument. One person might say, well, it will prevent the number of stray animals on the street, which could help bring down, cases of rabid dogs or cats attacking people or something along those lines. And so maybe, you'd approach it from that lens. While another person writing on the same topic, even making the same argument, could say, oh, well, animals bring such a wonderful spirit and can be helpful for those with a number of illnesses, both physical and mental. And so you could identify that as people are being helped and those who need the comfort or the help of an animal will have a greater likelihood of finding a better match for them if the humane societies are more well funded. So again, this is really going to change from one person to the next, regardless of if you're exploring the same topic and even making similar arguments. And this really comes back to carefully examining why you specifically are interested in the topic. And finally, what you want to keep in mind is understanding the role your research plays in public life. So let's say you were to take this argument to whoever could implement change. So let's say, for example, you're writing on extending the curfew for children and teenagers over the summer months. Maybe the city you live in, the curfew is normally 9 p.m., but you say, no, it's more appropriate, let them have until 10 p.m. So you want to think about, okay, well, Obviously, perhaps the children benefit because they have more playtime, but also maybe their parents also benefit as well because their children are getting out and about more. They are able to socialize more with peers and people in their community. But you can also think about it this way. What does that mean having kids out on the street later? So you might find, okay, well, while this might be good for parents, perhaps, this puts more pressure on the local police as they're trying to make sure kids are, being safe and being good out there. So you really do want to assess from multiple angles the impact your argument will have on different facets of public life. So you want to really think about all of the individuals, groups, and just overall entities that are impacted by the argument that you want to make. So what I would like you to do for the lecture assignment then is compose a brief write-up, so about 100 words, and I want you to detail the following or respond to the following questions to some degree. So the first one is, why do you want to research this topic? So this really gets at your purpose. What about this topic and your approach to it? What is that informed by? And that can be everything from, it's informed by the religion that I grew up with, or perhaps it was informed by an experience that you had, a story that you heard, anything along those lines. And again, that's going to be unique from one person to the next. I also want you to think in broad terms. What kind of argument do you want to make? So what should we do to address an area for improvement as you see it? I also want you to think, who do you think will benefit from your argument? So who are the main beneficiaries if your argument, your claim, your thesis, if that were to be implemented, who would benefit from it? And of course, I know a response might be, everyone does, but try to avoid that and get really specific to who might immediately benefit. Who are you first and foremost trying to help? Who's on your priority list? Who's the top on your list of priorities? And then, of course, the last question that you'll want to address is, how will your argument help this group of people? So it's not just, I want to help animals, but you want to think, okay, the argument that I want to make, how is that going to help them? How is that going to be beneficial to them? So compose a brief write-up, responding to those questions in some way or another. And what this should do is give you good direction of how to approach Project 4. And it should really ground the argument that you make, the evidence that you introduce, and really the way that you just develop this overall, this overall argument. So I would definitely recommend throughout our time composing Project 4, keep this close and keep it sort of as a way to anchor your writing, to say, okay, this is why I'm writing on this. This is the good that I want to do within some kind of community, be that your neighborhood, the town that you live in, the state, or, even the entire country. So, talking about the weekly homework then, you'll want to include the Core Lecture 20 summary and assignment in your Week 11 homework submission. Your overall Week 11 homework submission should include your summaries and lecture assignments from Core Lectures 20 and 21, as well as a mini lecture of your choice. And all of that is due to Canvas by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, March 24th. Now, if you have any questions or would like to chat about these concepts in greater detail, please don't hesitate to contact me via Canvas DM. All right, everyone, until next time.